Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, welcome to KQED Newsroom, and congratulations on completing this epic documentary. It's been more than 40 years now since Saigon fell, the war ended. Ken, why now? What's important about what happened back then to tell today in 2017?
You know, very simply, we've now got the distance, the perspective that allows us to understand more clearly what had taken place. The passions have not cooled down, but you're able to, with new scholarship, with the aging of the veteran population, but the aging also of the protest population, an opportunity to revisit this really, really difficult period.
And Lynn, I think you've said, I read, that the Vietnam War has been poorly understood. What do you mean by that, and what are you hoping to clarify?
There was a lot happening in different places at the same time, and it took a long time for us to even understand how to tackle it. We went back to the beginning, which you have to go back to the 19th century, understand colonialism, understand World War II, the Cold War, political dynamics here, and what it was like for ordinary people in Vietnam and here. And we felt it was important to see this not just from an American perspective, but also from Vietnamese perspectives. And that's never been done before. We had wonderful connections there to people who we could explain to them. We wanted to tell the human story of the war. And we found out that people wanted to talk. They wanted to share their stories in ways they don't ordinarily speak about this terrible tragedy that befell their country, and also to hear from us what it was like for Americans who came there to fight. But, you know, between the winners and the losers, there's a lot of reconciliation left to do.
Why is it so hard? I mean, in some ways it's only been, 4 decades. Maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but what is it that's left raw that's still unresolved?
We lost. Nobody, particularly Americans, want to dwell with that. So the tendency is to bury those experiences, and that can be convenient in the short run, but in the long run it's toxic. The country was divided, passionately divided, violently divided by the Vietnam War, and those angers and differences still kind of fester. You have soldiers who returned home unsure of their status, which had never happened to soldiers before in wars that we were forgotten.
And people who fled the country.
And there were no parades. You also have a huge group of people that felt it necessary to leave the country. So you had all these different factions and all these different opinions. And
Lynn, what's an example of something that you heard from one of the people you interviewed, or that you found out that really, it was sort of like a light bulb went off, like, I hadn't really thought of it that way?
Well, one of the things I think we investigated in a deep way is sort of, what does it mean to be a citizen? What does it mean to be a patriot? What does it mean to be brave? And over again, we were challenged in our assumptions about what those things mean. So there's not one specific moment, there are several that come to mind where you really had to think, okay, here's a guy, for example, who was drafted, and he wrestled with what to do, because at the time this happened to him in the late 60s, he had come to the conclusion the war was wrong. From a small town in the Midwest, he felt that if he didn't go to the war and went to Canada, his family would be ostracized, the community would call him a coward. And he went so far as to get his passport and think about deserting the army and going to Canada, but he didn't. And for him, that is the most painful part of this whole story. It was not going to Vietnam and being in combat, seeing friends die, and seeing some horrible things happen. It was the decision to go to the war.
How common was it for people in the military to have those kinds of conflicts?
This is the essential question for this war. It was so unsettled and so unsettling that basic ideas of what it means to be a brave soldier were challenged. You have to walk through a rice paddy and you can get blown up at any minute. That's terrifying. And that's not what you go to war thinking, that you're going to be brave just to walk across a landscape. You're going to do a brave act. And just the sense of sort of endurance and carrying on and just going forward and putting one foot in front of the other is a profound act in that situation.
You did talk to many then North Vietnamese people who were in the military at the time, and one of the things that struck me in the documentary, in the segment I saw, was how little information they had then as the war was going on.
Somebody used the analogy that for the North Vietnamese, they were like frogs at the bottom of the well looking up and thinking that that little circle was the whole sky. There was a, complete control of the narrative.
And in some ways that was an advantage
For the government.
For the government,
Absolutely.
and you know, because it made the promises of the revolution pretty simple and straightforward. And when you have the messiness that a democracy, even a corrupt, at times corrupt democracy as the South Vietnamese were, somebody said they were filthy and free. 500 newspapers and magazines in Saigon alone, and protests and all this sort of stuff when they were permitted. But it was the simplistic message of the communists and the control they exerted over their followers made them much more adapted to winning than the other side, which was chaotic, at times corrupt.
And their message did resonate with people in terms of, you know, Vietnam not being an occupied country and being unified and being liberated. And the language they used was very effective because it really spoke to people from, you know, hundreds of years of a yearning to be their own country.
You interviewed many more people, of course, than you could include in this documentary. Talk about what it took to find the right voices, especially in Vietnam.
So, you know, all of these projects, the end result, even at 10 episodes and 18 hours, represents only a tiny fraction, a 40th of the material that we've collected. And a lot of it is just accidental and serendipitous. You meet somebody, you might read an unpublished memoir and talk to somebody and say, no, that I'm not sure that they'd be good or even want to. Many people have and exhibit understandable reticence.
I think these memories and experiences are so close to the surface for the people who lived through them. That was the thing that I think we took away the most from getting to know people and hearing their stories, was you didn't have to go very far into an interview before these feelings and memories are flooding back and kind of overtaking people in the moment.
People would start a sentence not knowing that they'll be at a certain brand new and sometimes extraordinarily painful or joyous emotional state at the end of that sentence, so that they begin to talk about something and then suddenly their throat catches because what wells up in them is the significance of that memory in their lives.
Ken Burns, Lynn Novick, thank you, and congratulations again. We so very much look forward to seeing this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.